Myself.
First one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, my family down in Brazil. Actually, the first time I got in touch with the Bible was 1989. I was a kardecist. I was a spiritualist down in Brazil. I believed in reincarnation, talking to the spirits. And then I came to work as a nanny when I was 18 years old to a Christian family down in Fort Lauderdale. And the only requirement they had for me, I already spoke a little bit of the language. They said, it doesn't matter that the language, we're going to have the language barrier, but you have to go to church with the kids on Wednesday and on Sundays. I said, okay, I'll go. Yeah, no problem. And it took me about, and I started reading the Bible. And in Brazil at that time, the Bible was very difficult to read because it was in ancient Portuguese. In most of the churches used it in ancient Portuguese for some reason. And here it was very easy because it was in just English day by day. And so I started reading it, and I started asking God about that. It took me about four years to really believe in everything that was written there, and not like believe in reincarnation anymore. It took me about 14 years to get baptized. Because of that mentality of reincarnation and of deserving things, I could not understand the grace. I didn't think I was good enough to be baptized. So it took me 14 years to do it.
Thank you. Thank you. One last thought, with it being World Communion Sunday. Any thoughts around just different ways that maybe you've experienced the sacrament, whether you've received communion perhaps?
Well, I have a personal thing, this is my personal opinion, okay, about communion, about why Jesus sat down and had dinner with the apostles, with the disciples at the time. We human beings, when we come to church, we say, hi, how are you doing? Hi, how are you doing? We don't straighten up our relationships. For some reason, the food, when we have food together, there is a chemistry in our brain that changes our mindset towards that person. And it's amazing. It's a material thing of the body. It seals a little bit our relationship. So that's why, to me, it's very important to be able to eat together. If you're having like a Sunday school or some Bible study, in Brazil, I always had food. And I wouldn't, let's study and then have the food. No, it's like, okay, let's jump on the table together, eating and studying at the same time. And that really worked. It really made us get closer.
I'll continue. Believe it or not, this gave me the opportunity to talk to my mom a little bit more, because there was one time that I was talking to Pastor Esther that they don't say a lot of things from the past because of the Cuban Revolution, and I respect that from them. So yesterday I gave her a call and I say, hey, we need to talk about, a couple of things that I would like to know about my family, and my ancestors. And she opened up a little bit, and she said, well, we are under the umbrella of the Catholic Church, because, the Hispanic tradition is just to follow the Catholic Church. But basically, even though they have their belief and they are on that umbrella, they don't follow the Christian faith. So I can say the same thing, that I've been the first one that accepted Christ as my Lord and Savior. We talk to our parents. They are reading more the Bible, but they're just one step at a time. I think that I've been kind of like an example for my family. But I have to say that even my grandmother, even though she was Catholic, she was always there, praying for everybody. She has a lot of faith, and that actually inspires me, all the time to pray for other people and just following, basically, her good heart of, caring for other people.
Thank you.
I can just say something. A couple of years ago, I was just taking a class about global missions in seminary school. And I learned about all the unreached people around the world, and how so many people cannot express their faith or worship or anything because of the government. So it touched me, knowing that my parents went through the same situation, and I made that connection in there. It just really hit really close to home. I had the experience in there with my parents and what they went through, and so they inspired me. And another thing is, like, I realized that the gospel is for everybody. It's not for me, it's not for you, it's just for everybody. And I always say in social media, the gospel is for everybody, because I learned, that there's so many people that needs to learn about God, and so many people that have been, unreached right now because all the government restrictions. So that really touched me really close at home. Amen for all the differences.
Yes.
Yeah. I love the diversity in culture, and sometimes I just have to say, wow, God is amazing, and you came up with all these things and different food and different languages, and with the cultures, with this music and the costumes, the traditions and everything. But deep inside, we're just the same. I think that we're just looking for the same. I think that our soul is just thirsty and hungry for something, and I think that we just have to help each other just find.
We're very fortunate in South Africa. South Africa is, as I say, started on Christian foundation principles and so on, and there's always freedom of, going to church and that. And what I found too is the churches also work exceptionally well together. We would have prayer days because there were issues in South Africa, so the Christians would get together and have a prayer day for the country. A little while ago, there was a lot of upheaval in the country, and they set a time where people stopped their cars, got out, held hands all over the place, and they were all praying. So they're a praying nation, and it stems back to the Dutch folk during the Zulu Wars. They prayed that if God would save them, because they were surrounded with the Zulus, and they were, and they just pray that God saves them. They'll set up a memorial for that particular day, and they promised to serve God for the rest of their lives. So they became very strong Christians. Then also the different African tribes, is the Khoisas came down first, and they settled in what I call the Transkei. It's a state like New Jersey, a little higher up. The Zulus settled there, and they set up a lot of missionary schools. The Catholic Church and the Methodist churches set up Catholic schools that were Christian based. And I know Mandela came out of the Transkei. He went to the school, he went to university there. So as a country, we were blessed, even though we had a lot of struggles over the years. It was first the British and the Dutch that had the Boer War, and then you had the Zulu War, and then you had South Africa was also a melting pot, so you had a lot of different religions. You had Hindus and Muslims, and a lot of the blacks used to have witch doctors that they believed in and things like that. So you had this melting pot there. But one thing, growing up, I became friends with Jewish folk, Hindus, Muslims, and I found basically they're all the same. They all want for their families, they want their kids to be happy, they want their families. And what I found over time, some Muslims that became Christians, they said one thing they couldn't understand. Their religion was a God of punishment, and we teach a God of love, and they say they could accept that. So a lot of the Indian people were converting to Christianity. But growing up, I know my families had a lot of challenges, especially with me when I was born. I had various health issues growing up, and my mom, she did a talk on prayer, and I was reading this morning again. I found it when I left South Africa, and it's just amazing. And she says, looking back in her life, she can see exactly where God had answered all her prayers. And sometimes at the time, she realized, why is God, why is this happening? But she realized what she went through, she could help other families through that type of period. And so also I didn't come from a wealthy family. My dad struggled. He started off life carrying tools for the signalman in South Africa. He worked his way up in the transport services. So we were always a family, and yet as a child we never realized, my sister and I, the financial struggles that they went through. But we know they were a praying family, and I think that helped me a lot growing up as well.
Okay.
When I had issues. Always, David was one of my favorite
Characters.
people in there, and the Lord is my shepherd is my favorite passage. So I, even when we left South Africa, a lot of things were going against us, and I said to Barbara, because we left there in 2007, we had to sell up everything, get the money value converting here was horrible, and we just wondered how we're going to do things. But if you saw what you did in 6 months, and it's all through prayer, sold a house, we sold a car, we sold everything, and within 6 months we got on an aeroplane to come here. And people weren't selling houses there. Some of my friends go to Australia, their house was 2 years on the market. I sold mine in 2 days without a estate agent. But we prayed for everything, so I know God wants us to pray. I think South African cultural difference is the language. Basically, there's the Zulus and the Xhosas. If you go to a Methodist church and these guys, and they harmonize their singing, it's just a vibe in that church. It's just beautiful. So you've got the language, even there's 17 different African languages in South Africa. And I remember my mom took a lady that worked for us in Bloemfontein down to Port Elizabeth. And at Port Elizabeth they spoke Xhosa and she spoke Sotho. She couldn't understand a word. She became homesick. She wanted to go back home. So that's where you've got things. But the Methodists have done a great job. They've got a lot of good Methodist preachers in their communities today. The Catholics as well. The Catholic Church is really, really strong.
Well, of course I was Church of England because that's where I was born. I was baptised. But as I told you, I didn't really get to church very much, just holidays and things like that. But I did have a slight interest because I didn't know what it was about. And finally, when my mother married again, the trouble was the man she married didn't believe in any religion at all, and he thought it was a complete waste of time. So he didn't want me to go to Sunday school or anything. And so I wasn't allowed to go. But when I got a little older, I joined the Brownies. You know, they came before the Scouts. And so right next to this beautiful church, it's very old and very beautiful, you know, was the Brownie hut. So what I used to do is when I came out of the Brownies, instead of going straight home, I'd go into the church, which they never locked the doors in those days, and I was in complete awe, because inside it was huge, you know, and all these great walls and stained windows. I just used to sit there in the pew and just look and stare and think this must be something wonderful. Then when I got home, I was in big trouble because I was late. But it didn't stop me. Every now and then I'd go and look. But I guess I was very scared of my stepfather, and I think that's another thing that stopped me really getting into religion, you know. That was it.
Well, I apologize that I choked up a little bit because the moment I went through, well, I apologize that I choked up a little bit because the moment I went through some difficult times, you know, by myself and back in Puerto Rico and here in the United States. So I think that prediction that the lady made was sort of something that really bears in mind all the time, because it makes me become a stronger person because of the challenges and the criticism, the negative impact that, you know, society plays in your life, and you have to learn to make good and positive choices to move forward. And I will think and I'll say that, man, you know, I can see, you know, I can find when I'm a person of faith, and I think, and a strong conviction, and I feel like when I say a prayer, when I'm in difficulty, I find some relief or refuge to overcome those moments. And I always say, what does man sin do? The word of God is always going to be there as my refuge, as my inspiration, my motivation. And I think I will find a way of getting out of those difficult moments. And that's what really motivates me today, because the word's all going to be there Because if one meant to do, the word's going to be there to give me the guidance and strength I need to overcome those moments, and it continues to make me stronger, especially in today's society, because things have been changed. I've noticed things have been changing considerably in a negative way. It's because I work with kids every day. I'm in the school system, and I can see where it's going, and I can. A lot of people are opposed to me, but there's a phrase that I always say: if you stick with this. It doesn't matter how many people are against you. You stick with your conviction, because that's what you believe in, and it will take you wherever you want to go. So it brought me here today, and I'm still stronger. And when I'm working with the kids, I can motivate them, inspire them, and let them understand that you don't have to give in to what people say and do, but you have to have your own belief and conviction and stick with it, because that's what may say or do. So glad to be a part of this. Of the Methodist Church, I got involved. My neighbors back when I was a kid were Methodist, and I was, I was in the Anglican Church, the Catholic Church. But then when I came here, I sort of visited many different churches, and I sort of found a little comfort here, and the chemistry of the people there seems to be really warm and caring. So I do go downtown St. Peter, the First United Methodist Church, and 2nd Avenue and 3rd Street, but this is closer to home, so I generally come here. It inspires me because of the challenges that you face today in society. Society is going through changes I would say the negative way. Technology has really dominated our community and our life now, and it sort of short circuit a lot of the things that people do today. So it makes me stronger, because personally it makes me stronger, because I feel like I have overcome a lot of difficulty, and there's still a lot for me to learn, and that's one of my principal desire in life, to learn as much as I can. So I never give up on anything. I always think, I have a phrase that I would say, because I'm in education, a career in education has no expiration date, and the process of learning is infinitive. One never stops learning till the day dies, and you never know when the influence will stop. So we continue to expand and grow in religiously, and whatever education doesn't have limitations. So we learn something each day. And I always tell my friends, if a day passes and you don't learn something new, then life doesn't worth living. There's so much to learn, and we always think when we go to college and come back, we know everything. But it's just the beginning. And I continue to grow. I'm getting older. I'm stronger. My memory is improving. I'm an athlete. That's key to my life, my memory, because as you're getting older, people. Well, the tradition here in America, that thing, as soon as you get to a certain age, your life's supposed to go down the drain. But I'm getting stronger. I'm more powerful, and because of that conviction, and I feel like I have a strong faith, and that's going to lead me to higher ground, or to the promised land. Living in different countries, I think, I was in Jamaica, there was a little bit of, most people have some belief and really does not practice a religion. But in Puerto Rico, it was different, because 90% of the population was Catholic. So, and it sort of bring the peoples together, makes it a little more unique. Well, it is part of the Latin tradition, that the Latin culture are very unique people that goes together, and they do everything together. But in Jamaica, we are from the English descendant, and we are a lot more independent, even though we all had some belief, and most of the people do have some belief, have conviction and faith, but they are a little more worship independently. But in the Latin tradition, they are a lot more close together, and sort of that build the chemistry among the people, and they practiced a lot of ritual, in the faith that keep them together and make them a lot more closer. And the love and romanticism makes it much more unique in the Latin country.
Well, it's been difficult for me while growing up, to really believe in the concept of love and believe in that the most important thing in life is love. And that's something I learned from something that my sister brought home from the Catholic Church. Because in our family, we were very straight-laced and not physically showing any affection or anything. Or it was very difficult for me to come over, to overcome that. And it's been a process. I became a scientist. I was a scientist for 40 years at the bench. And being a scientist, you become very skeptical and you learn to test everything by reason and so forth, just by logical methods. And you really, you have to come to a point in your life where you have to decide to take a leap of faith and believe in things not seen or heard, but just believe in your heart. And like the song Amazing Grace, you know. And joining the choir has really taught my spirit how to become more and more in close to the faith and to understand it with your heart as well as your mind. And I've learned that the four things in the Methodist Church that you have to four-legged stool, is it? Scripture, tradition, reason, and experience. And so I had to learn to incorporate all of those and not just go by reason alone. And it's hard just by nature of my profession to be so engrossed in scientific things that you have to learn to become more broad-minded and embrace all four aspects of church and faith. And one thing I've learned is that although my parents were not Christian, they had so many good qualities. The one thing they have is this Chinese aspect of their culture is filial piety. That is, you do respect your parents and your elders, and you respect them and cherish them. And they also set examples for me in the hard work that they did, because they came to a new country without knowing the language or knowing anything about the culture, and yet they worked very, very hard, and they set a good example for me to do my work ethic. And so I've learned a lot from them, even though they were not Christian, and there are similarities of things that they have done to what my faith has. Speaking about cultural differences, going on a mission trip to foreign countries, you come to realize that the faith is one faith. We went to church, a Spanish church once, and we had to sing this hymn, and they were singing it in Spanish, and simultaneously we were singing it in English, and we were all together, just having the same spirit, and it was just wonderful.
Or how?
Let me start there.
Sure.
Even though my grandmother was very Catholic and we were all very Catholic, and I was very Catholic, they thought I was going to become a priest. I kind of went the other way. My father died, and then I started asking a lot of questions. And even though I didn't become a scientist, I was very skeptical and asked a lot of questions, and I became an atheist. And I would describe myself more of an existentialist atheist. And I was that for a long time. And even though my grandmother and her sister, my aunt, my tia Toma, were very devout Catholics, and I would just notice that they had, because when you're an existentialist, dread and anxiety and life and everything like that, suicide is something that you always think about, because you always have to face the absurdity of life and every day is courage. But here with two people who didn't have those anxieties and worries, and they just lived their lives in examples of love. And when this neighbor friend of mine invited me to this church camp, that's when I was confronted with the preaching of Jesus as Lord, and I ended up having this experience where God became real, and I've never doubted that experience ever since. But when they found out that I had this experience, they were just so happy for me, and they girded me, because the faith really it's always there's always a foundation of the saints before, and they were my two main saints. I have a master's in divinity. I went to a Southern Baptist seminary, and one of the most influential theologies in my life is liberation theology, but the Catholic one, because it was very strong in Colombia, and it affects. If you go to my Sunday school class here, you'll see how it affects. I teach it underhanded, and when we emphasize the Sermon on the Mount, and we once in my Sunday school class, it took us 2 years to go through the Sermon on the Mount. So if you want some in-depth study, come to my Sunday school class. But the liberation theology, which Gustavo Gutierrez and all those other guys, one of the martyrs was from Colombia when they had a conference there. And this Pope, his name before he became Francis was Jorge. Just on the side there.